I'm the Philosophical Bachelor, and today I'm going to talk about the human spirit. The Human Place in the Cosmos by Max Scheler is a work of philosophical anthropology. Published in 1929, it seeks to answer what is the human being and what is his place in being. It is at once a work that is philosophical, scientific, and theological. Its importance is its metaphysical explanation of how spirit came to exist in the world. All living things possess varying psychic levels. Scheler outlines 4 levels. The lowest level belongs to plants, where feelings and drives are not yet separated. They possess no inwardness, no sensations, and no consciousness. To have sensation requires a reporting back, a feedback of its states to a center which then affects its subsequent actions, which plants lack. They have no memory. They have no ability to learn, an ability even microorganisms possess. They only have a general drive towards growth and reproduction. They are passive since they do not choose their nutrition. Because the food of plants is inorganic material that is found almost everywhere, they do not require mobility in order to find food. In terms of reproduction, plants are passively fertilized by winds, birds, and insects. If the environment is unfavorable, they simply perish. Scheler suggests that if plants have just one of the above qualities it is deficient in, it will require them all, because these abilities are linked. If, for instance, it needs to move to find food, then it will also need to have sensors and a central control system to help it successfully navigate to sources of food. The second level of psychic life is instinct, found in animals. Animals that have never laid eggs or experienced winter before somehow know to prepare for it. Instinct is inborn and hereditary, taking place in a fixed and unchanging rhythm. Instinct is not a reaction to changes, but to specific structures typical for a species, making them rigid. Instincts do not originate in sensory experience, but are triggered by them. What an animal has the ability to sense and represent is governed by its instincts. What an animal can see and hear is only what is of importance to its instincts, with its memory and senses enclosed and entrenched by instincts, writes Scheler. Instincts are a more primitive form of psychic life than those established by associations, learning, and training. Animals can learn, though learning and comprehension is not instinct, since it serves the individual animals and not its species. Instincts serve the species and not the individual animal. Out of instinct emerges single sensations and representations with associative connections, when specific drives seek gratification from fulfilling its instincts. Scheler sees this as the beginning of intelligence, when meaning is made from what was previously merely an automatic instinct and where individuality can emerge for the members of the species. More complex combinations of representations lead to more types of meaning. However, the development of intelligence entails a trade-off. Human beings are more flexible due to our better developed intelligence and associative memory, but we have deteriorated instincts. Hence, from instinct evolves 2 higher psychic levels, the 3rd level of habit and the 4th level of intelligence. Habit comes from associative memory, where behaviors and even reflexes are conditioned slowly but steadily through an earlier behavior of the same type. It is directed by its usefulness to life and develops through trial and error. The range of animal behavior is wide, leading to some behavior being more successful at satisfying the drives of an animal than others. Such success causes the animal to repeat those behaviors more, leading to habits. Associative memory is related to intellectual development, since associations contain intellectual factors, as if something like insight has been awakened during the numerous trials. There is also imitation of the reactions of others to a similar experience, which is a precursor to tradition, adding a new determination of animal behavior from the past, in addition to biological inheritance of instinctive behavior. Tradition does occur already in animals. Herds learn what alpha animals show, and they hand it down to forthcoming generations, notes Scheler. While habit and tradition are already higher order cognitive developments, for cognition to develop further, their hold needs to be broken. Such disengagement of drives, feelings, and affects mark the next step towards higher level cognition, making excessiveness possible. Drives become a possible source of pleasure quite independently of the demands of life as a whole, he writes. Higher order animals, disengaged from instinctive rhythms, can pursue pleasure for pleasure's sake. For instance, having sex not for the sake of reproduction, but just for sheer pleasure. This happens in the fourth level of psychic life, organically bound practical intelligence. A living being behaves intelligently whenever it can act meaningfully without trials, explains Scheler. It is practically and organically bound because the animal acts to fulfill its organic drives or needs, which are its goals. We can see such practical intelligence when an animal encounters novel situations atypical for its species and are able to react by making a choice. Intelligence is a sudden insight into a context of facts and values within the environment. It is productive and anticipative, where one possesses a new set of facts which were never experienced earlier. Higher order non-human animals already possess such intelligence. However, such animals are unable to choose between values themselves, which requires a sense of morality to shape value preferences. While some scientists do not think there is an essential difference between human beings and animals, Scheler believes that human beings occupy a special place in the cosmos, where their abilities go far above mere intelligence and the ability to make free choices. He has proposed 4 levels of psychic life, but what he thinks humans possess is not merely a 5th level. The 4 levels can be seen as a gradual evolutionary development of psychic abilities across living things, but he thinks what humans uniquely possess goes beyond this framework of levels, irreducible to what evolution can do. So far, this framework of psychic levels does not differ much from what Aristotle had proposed, which is how the vegetative soul belongs to plants, the appetitive soul to animals, and the rational soul to human beings, each level accumulation of the previous levels. However, Scheler thinks that reason does not adequately capture the essence of human beings. He calls the unique essence only found in human beings spirit. To be clear, Scheler, unlike other philosophers, separates spirit and psyche, considering spirit to be above psyche. Spirit contains reason, the thinking of ideas, but in addition includes intuition of essences, volition and emotions, leading to actions such as kindness, love, repentance, awe, states of wonder, bliss, despair, and free decision making. It is characterized by its existential detachment from organic being, a freedom transcending merely living. A being with spirit is not bound by its drives and environment like plants and animals. Hence, it is non-environmental, making it world-open. This ability to transcend its immediate environment and bodily requirements allow it to reflect on its own drives, its limitations arising from the pushback or resistance from things and its reactions to things, turning them all into objects so as to understand their essences. It can take a distance from things, achieving an objectivity towards the contents of the world and also itself, the latter making it self-conscious. According to Scheler, animals have not achieved such self-awareness, reminding me of Jacques Lacan's mirror stage, where lower animals do not recognize their reflections in the mirror as themselves. Animals can hear and see, but without knowing that they hear and see, explains Scheler. They are in an ecstatic state where they are totally immersed in their being, absorbed in the concrete reality of each and any of their present moments, and are unable, unlike humans, to step away from themselves to view themselves as objects. One reason why human beings have such an ability is because their senses are unified. Our senses of sight, sound, touch, smell, and taste come together in a coordination to generate one world. Scheler thinks such a unification is absent in animals. According to a study he references, a spider recognizes its prey through touch when the prey is trapped in its web, but if it sees the prey visually in front of it, it will run away, suggesting that its sense of touch is not connected to its sense of sight. He thinks animals lack world space, a stable background to their movements. Instead, they see the world moving whenever they move. Human beings, on the other hand, are able to have world space because we can place not only objects we see through our eyes within space, but also ourselves, which we do not see, as an object within space. Animals lack the idea of empty forms of space and time within which they are placed to encounter things and events. Scheler proposes that such negative concepts only belong to beings with spirit, because only we can conceive of the lack of satisfaction and emptiness, since we encounter such emptiness within our hearts. The human ability to objectify allows us to carry out science. Because we can view ourselves as an object placed among other objects in causal interconnections, we are able to understand the world as a place where objects and laws are independent of us. Scheler tells us that this ability of spirit to transcend the body makes it superior to both himself and to the world. Spirit, since it is transcendent, is not itself part of the physical world, but must lie in the supreme ground of being itself. He leaves unexplained what ground of being is, but towards the end, it should become clearer what this difficult concept means. Another characteristic of spirit is that it cannot be objectified. It exists only in freely carrying out its acts. From the outside, we can only observe the manifestations of spirit in the actions of its person, that person's behavior. Spirit is what is behind the scenes. It is what is doing the objectification of other things, but cannot look at itself from the outside. We cannot objectify our own spirit, and neither can we objectify the spirit of other people, though we are aware of them as we identify with them and act together with them. One spiritual act of the human being is the act of ideation. While animal and human intellects recognize sensations such as pain, which directs it towards measures to alleviate the pain, as well as, for humans, towards a scientific understanding of it, the spiritual act of ideation takes a more abstract and distant view of the phenomena, asking questions like what is pain itself, and what must the ground of being be like, what must the world be like, to allow for pain. From just a single example, the spiritual act of ideation can generalize, grasping the essential qualities and structures of the world, allowing it to universalize its knowledge to separate essence from existence. Scheler sees this ability as the fundamental character of the human spirit. While how we reason may change over time, the human disposition to the act of reasoning remains. Scheler sees the ability to idealize as an act of saying no to what reality tells us in favor of an idealization. He agrees with Edmund Husserl's phenomenological reduction, where the accidental is bracketed so as to leave us only with the essential. This ability to negate as an ability of spirit is an important point Scheler makes towards understanding what spirit is, where we turn away from the concrete sensory contents of things and the soul turns inwards to understand itself. This saying no extends to how we are able to say no to the demands of our drives. For instance, our bodily drives may tell us that we need food, through giving us pangs of hunger, but we can refuse its demands, say because we are on a hunger strike or simply on a diet. Animals, by contrast, are unable to do this. They will seek out food when hungry and cannot adopt an ideological posture towards refusing to do so. Thus, Scheler calls human beings an ascetic of life. Because we are able to say no, the human being is able to build an ideal realm of thoughts above his world of perception, and thereby to divert more and more of the energy dormant in the repressed drives into his spirit, sublimating drive energy into spiritual activity. When we repress our drives, the energy that will typically be expended to satisfy the drives can instead be diverted to spiritual tasks, such as penetrating towards the essence of things. However, Scheler clarifies that it is not negation that gives rise to spirit. Spirit is a fundamental attribute of those beings that possess spirit, which are self-conscious beings. However, spirit in itself has no power and must get its energy from this repression of the drives, this asceticism of rejecting what its drives desire. Spirit initiates this repression by rejecting the impulses of our drives, persuading the drives instead towards its own aims through images of ideas and values that it places in front of the drives, so that they would execute the projects of spirit. Hence, spirit operates indirectly. If it tries to compel instead of persuade through such images away from what it deems to be bad in the drives, it could lead to a counter-reaction, strengthening the drive's resolution. So Scheler thinks that people should not fight the inclination of the drives directly, but instead mobilize the energies of the drives towards the good tasks indirectly. For instance, an example I thought of is how, instead of fighting one's addiction towards smoking like a war on cigarettes, to rather forget about that and go towards a healthy lifestyle where smoking would then be forgotten about naturally. Scheler rejects the positive theory of spirit, where spirit is what is superior, even almighty, and possesses its own power, for instance in an eternal supreme deity. He thinks the mistake of this theory comes from the unjustified assumption that the higher the form of being, the more power they have, such that they are the foundation for lower beings. While he also rejects the idea that higher forms spring from processes that belong to lower forms of being, such as the doctrine of materialism or teleology, he thinks there is a dependency on nature that is bottom-up. Animals depend on plants for food, while plants depend on inorganic matter. A higher form of being does not realize itself by its own forces, but by those forces that are lower, writes Scheler. He thinks this service of sublimation of the lower to the higher order is an underlying process in nature which results in an increasing complexification of things, culminating, for the moment, in human spirit. The next step is for this same idea of impulsion and spirit to be brought to the level of the cosmos. Impulsion is a vital force, a life force and a drive to create reality. In Scheler's account, capital S, spirit, or the deity, or the ultimate ground of being, has no power in itself to create reality. What it can do is to direct impulsion the same way the human spirit does. For this cosmic being to achieve self-realization, it needs to reject what its impulsion wants to do, so that its energies are directed towards spirit, allowing spirit in humankind to arise, so that a cosmic spirit can then arise subsequently, and in that way move towards its own self-realization. Theism falsely puts the goal at the beginning, writes Scheler. Theism's positive theory of spirit posits an all-powerful spirit at the beginning of time, creating weaker entities. Scheler is saying instead that at first there was only impulsion, as a chaotic vital force in the world. For a spirit worthy of being called divine to arise, a lesser spirit first needs to arise, and it does so in human beings. With the spiritualization of impulsion, where impulsion's energy is restrained by the resistance it faces, this energy can then go towards empowering spirit. As this process continues, spirit gets closer to its goal of a self-realization of the deity, the more the cosmos becomes its perfect embodiment. Just when a human being develops self-consciousness and hence develops spirit, it is also when the idea of a trans-worldly, an infinite and absolute being occurs to him. When the cosmos becomes an object of his comprehension, he had to turn and see around himself while shuddering and ask himself, "Where am I? What is my place?" explains Scheler. The answer that he is merely a part of the world, in the same way as any other object, is no longer adequate since his spirit transcends the world of space and time. When he considers nothingness, he discovers the possibility of absolute nothingness, which causes him to wonder why there is something, a world rather than nothing, and why he exists. Scheler thinks this consciousness of world, self and God happens all at once at the same time. Man then realizes the world and his existence are contingent. He can now act in one of two ways. The first way is the way of truth. First, he could pause in wonder and start directing his spirit to grasp the absolute and become part of it, writes Scheler. The second way is the way of delusion. Out of a desire for self-preservation, where due to his alienation from nature through his objectification of it, plus the human capacity for imagination, he invents myths to feel safe. Scheler rejects religion's theistic presupposition. The fundamental relation the human being has to the ground of being consists in this ground grasping itself and realizing itself in the human being who is, because he has both spirit and life, a part of the ground's own spirit and impulsion, he writes. God is not a first uncaused cause, pre-existing everything, but instead something co-created by human beings and the primordial ground, which becomes God from the increasing interpenetration of spirit and impulsion. The human being is the meeting place of spirit and impulsion. Logos is acted out with the human being, writes Scheler. Spirit and impulsion are growing by themselves precisely in spirit's historical manifestation and in the evolution of life in the world. One can partake of ultimate being's life and spiritual activity only by co-execution, by the act of our readiness to act and by active identification, he tells us. While we have to lose the comfort of our myths, we instead have the knowledge that we are helping to bring about the coming to be of God. By being ready to act, can we participate in the bringing forth of absolute being. In conclusion, I cite Eugene Kelly's introduction to the book. He summarized Scheler's work in 4 theses. 1. The living body and the psyche are a unity and ascended together in a 4-step evolutionary process. 2. Spirit is a non-emergent and autonomous phenomenon that stands in opposition to impulsion. 3. Spirit pertains to the very foundation of the universe. 4. The role of the human being in the cosmos is the infusion of life with spirit. Extending the last thesis, through the infusion of life with spirit, the cosmic spirit can arise, in a process where the ground of being becomes God. According to Scheler, God is not a supreme being there at the start, but is something that comes to be through the development of the world, with the crucial step being the arising of spirit in human beings. Thank you for listening to the Philosophical Bachelor.